On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Hoang Bao. He is the Director of Privacy and Data Privacy Officer at Axon. We're going to be talking all about privacy engineering and a lot around the growth and the career path around it. It is a hot, emerging area. Typically, you have to have a legal background, and that's changing. And we're going to get Hoang to tell us a little bit about that, how you can get into it. He's going to tell us what the differences are, what the definition of privacy engineering is, in case you haven't really come across it. But super excited to do this episode with you. Thanks for being a guest.
Yeah, no problem. I'm excited to be here and to talk more about privacy engineering. Something I enjoy very much, and looking forward to share with folks.
Awesome. All right, let's dive in. I'm going to have you start at the top because I just want to make sure everyone knows what the definition of privacy engineering is from your perspective, so we have context for the conversation. What is privacy engineering?
Yeah, you start with the tough question because not many people actually know what the definition is, and there is no common definition out there actually. And I only realized the extent of the kind of openness of this definition when I joined the IAPP Privacy Engineering Advisory Board earlier this year. And for folks who might not be familiar, the IAPP is one of the largest privacy professional association out there, been around for a really long time, has a lot of membership. And over the year, the organization has undertook, definition building, community building in different areas of privacy. And one of the tasks that I got the opportunity to do in my first year, actually first few months as part of the advisory board member, is to help the team think about what is that definition, privacy engineering. And to be honest, that there is something out there built around processes, and if folks want to link me on LinkedIn, I will share the definition because it has to be taken within the context of itself, and it's involving thinking about privacy engineering tasks. Think about actually engineering tasks, but from a privacy angle, meaning how does personal data flow, management, etc., relate to your engineering work? So, for example, if a software developer is building a database, right, that job could have a privacy engineering component to it if they are collecting, storing, structuring personal data in their work. So for a lot of technical discipline out there, if they touch personal data, there could be a privacy engineering component to it. So that's one way you can look at privacy engineering. And I think that's what the definition right now at the IPP rotates around.
And that's good to know. It's interesting as we're getting, a lot more complexity around data. I know data governance, because of AI, is making a resurgence. Now we're talking about these privacy roles. The definition is evolving because it's come to the forefront, right? Like it has been, cast in the spotlight of we need privacy. There are privacy laws; they're emerging every day. So now we have, a data privacy officer. When you're looking at the emergence and growth, and obviously you have people who might be familiar with data governance. What's the difference between privacy and data governance?
They are pretty closely related. And I like to think that data governance is really essential to build out a privacy program. So for me, what data governance means really is like establish a data framework, right? A structure for your data to be collected, ingested, managed throughout its life cycle. And artifacts of that work can be, for example, a data classification. How do you classify your data within your company? And within that realm, there will be certain components that touch on privacy. So, for example, how do you classify personal data at your company? Like, what does that entail, for your business space, for your sector? How do you manage that set of personal data as it goes through the life cycle from collection to storage to how it's being used to retention, deletion, etc.? All of that is within the realm of privacy, but data governance can also be broader because data governance can contain non-personal data, which is outside of the realm of privacy. things that are more business confidential, etc., also deserve a good data governance program in place to manage.
So, something that just I was just thinking about. I've had a couple of data governance people on, and obviously, it is central to a lot of privacy security programs. It sits within different departments. It depends who's responsible for it. The common thing that I'm starting to realize in talking to them is that as we are seeing the growth in people wanting to implement AI solutions, they're realizing you need to have a little bit of your house in order. I guess for you, are you seeing that direct driver as to why privacy is potentially growing, or has it always been there and we just haven't maybe noticed it as much?
I think I'm a little bit biased because data governance is actually what got me into privacy almost 2 decades ago. This is when I was starting at Yahoo. And at that particular point in time, Yahoo has tons and tons of user, I think close to 1 billion user with tons of personal data that's there. And I joined to help data governance, thinking about the life cycle of those data sets. So because how I came into it and how it led me into more privacy topics, such as, how do you think about policy development? How do you think about the user experience, etc.? Data governance led me to those areas. In my experience, it has always been there. In recent years, it just got more attention because, again, back when I first started, the cloud was not a big thing, for example. But now I think many more companies that are on the cloud are working with much larger sets of data. So I think, on top of all the regulatory components of it, that's what led data governance to be talked more and more and think of as a top of mind topic for exec and leadership at company more than before.
Absolutely, that makes sense. Obviously, I mean, you've been doing this for a long time. That's why I was super excited to have you on, because your history with privacy and data governance stretches back, extensively at larger companies. You've seen a lot of this progress. I guess before we dive into maybe some of the career components of it, as you've been seeing some of these privacy laws come online, we have a number of them. Europe has some. There's discussions all the time. Are you seeing these discussions, in terms of companies that maybe hadn't really thought about privacy as a function? Are those laws forcing companies? Obviously they can always go to a consulting company, but are they thinking about internally bringing those functions in because it's becoming ever present?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, privacy is becoming more table stake nowadays. When I first started, GDPR wasn't around yet. Those were still directives, meaning, not regulations. So they were to phrase it more suggestions of how you could implement something versus what you have to do. But I think with GDPR coming online in 2018, and if you look at different parts of the world since, there has been many similar law, like in Brazil, there's LGPD. Recently there were also regulations that are GDPR similar in Vietnam, in India, that has been rolling out. So I think a significant portion of the world now has privacy regulations, developed or implemented. So companies, what I've seen too, has been focusing on building out their privacy team. Back in the day, a lot of companies tend to have one person, if that, right, managing the privacy program, and expect that person to do everything. And now I'm very glad to see that's the minority in terms of the way that companies structure these. There's at least a team. It might still be a small team in a lot of places, but now there are more than one person in the typical format doing privacy for a company as an internal full-time employee or as a few internal full-time employees.
And I guess, over the time, as you've seen people building out teams, I think something you mentioned to me that I hadn't paid attention to, but as I kind of did some research and wanted to speak to you, I realized a lot of people who were in privacy had legal backgrounds or came from some, legal, education, something down that path, because obviously I could understand, privacy and legal ramifications and I guess, from that perspective, from a historical basis, was that kind of how people got into privacy generally?
Yeah, absolutely. I had the opportunity to work with some really amazing privacy professionals in my past, and I would have to say quite a few have that law degree or that legal background. I think I was pretty fortunate because, as you know, I'm not a lawyer. I have a background in computer science, and I was lucky enough to start my career under some really amazing privacy professionals who were actually also not lawyers. So I really get a chance to learn like how can someone with a non-legal background can really make an impact, can really lead privacy conversations at big impactful companies. So through that, I got a chance to kind of just hone my skill around the area more. And I think in the last few years, especially, as it's been very satisfying for me personally as a privacy professional to see more diversity in terms of folks who make up this profession. Now, I think there are a lot more like folks from a technical degree, sometimes like a technical degree, a policy and operational background who are participating in these conversations. And the one thing I actually think is the driver there is now that regulations are out there, even though they're evolving, a lot of companies are focusing on like how do we operationalize these requirements in the right way, in a scalable way, in a way that might involve technical infrastructure, etc., to really do the scaling. So I think because of that, there's more space for non folks with non-legal background.
Yeah, and obviously we're going to include your LinkedIn profile. I mean, you're modest. You've worked at some fantastic companies building out privacy programs, so some they can look at it. But I mean, Netflix, Google. You mentioned Yahoo, Walmart, Twitch, now at Axon. So your background, obviously, without the legal degree, stands for itself. And I guess you mentioned as you're seeing teams build out that's falling by the wayside a little bit. And you mentioned, obviously, you were able to be fortunate to come up and not have that, but learn from other people that did not have that legal background. I guess if I'm listening to this and I'm like, hey, privacy seems like an interesting area. It seems like it's growing. It seems like it's got a lot of business context to it. It's becoming table stakes, as you mentioned, and I'd like to get into it. And I'm not a lawyer. How does somebody actually get into privacy? It seems like one of those where if you it's like compliance and risk. If you happen to have a great mentor, it's a great starting point. But if you don't, you're trying to find how to get in from the outside.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I've been really blessed in terms of like my career path and mentors and leaders that I've been able to learn from. I think for folks who are looking to enter the privacy profession, the one thing might be worth to clarify is that even though a legal degree is not necessary, I think understanding the regulation and the law is important. So what I have found that could help folks to get that foundation is to think about certification, etc., that is available out there that will give you one foot into the door. So to demonstrate that, hey, look, if folks ask me about GDPR and data subject requests, etc., like I am familiar with the topic at least. So I think investing a little bit there is a good way to go about it. I think engaging with the community is also really helpful. What I've found, especially for privacy engineering, because it's an emerging area of privacy, is that the community is still small enough where you can reach out there and someone will know someone, and if they can't help you directly, they will introduce somebody else. And I feel like that is probably the best investment of your time if you want to get into the area, is to get that foundation and then to get yourself out there, talk to folks who've been doing it, connect with folks, yeah.
Makes sense. I mean, we can also link to the iapp.org website. And you mentioned certification. So, and again, to clarify for people listening, because, I don't know, maybe somebody's thinking, hey, this is great, I'm going to jump in. Maybe they're like, maybe it's just an interesting topic. But, a lot of times we see certifications, cloud certifications, programming. A lot of times you get those baseline skills, and then it's really hard because it's a little bit more structured, right? Like it's a longer history behind it to get in entry level. You're competing with computer science degree people, all those different things. When it comes to, I guess, privacy, it's a small community. It's emerging. I do the certification, and I'd like to get some tangible experience. Like, would I actually maybe seek somebody else in my org out and go, hey, I'd like to participate, obviously, in addition to my job. Like, is that something that I'd be doing? Or, would I try to, start networking and just trying to learn more? Because I think going from the certification to actually starting to maybe get more comfortable with the concepts. I mean, for me, certifications were always like, I can learn it, but I still have a bridge to gap to the execution and practical side of it. Do you have any recommendations from that perspective?
Yeah, great question. So, and this is me getting a little bit tactical, but I think it could be a fun experiment for folks to try out to research a lot of the privacy programs I know out there, because it tends to be like a smaller team, like what you and I talked about before. No longer one person, but there's still not enough, right? There tend to be a team of like 4 or 5 or something like that. But the way that a lot of these programs scale, which I've seen at multiple companies, so I think it's becoming more and more of like, a fairly common practice out there, is to seek privacy champion. There's a few different names that folks used to refer to these, but privacy champions basically are folks who will spend part of their time helping out the privacy team to kind of like privacy spot check across the organization where that might be risk, etc. So, sometimes they will pick folks who are sitting in different business areas, or frankly, folks who just have bandwidth to help out. And I think to look internally at your privacy team, if there's one and say like, hey, I want to be a privacy champion, I think the likelihood of them welcoming you with open arms are very, very, very high. And I think usually too is those kind of relationship that will help you get that practical experience, right? Because I think if you start helping out as a privacy champion on a task here and task there, found that you like it, which is the most important thing, and then you do well at it, I think that there's a lot of potential for you to increase the scope of what you do to continue to help the internal team, or just even build your skill sets further.
Awesome. I like it. I think a lot of times you hear people say, take the initiative, go ask for the work. It's not always easy because you're doing something, but if you do like it, I mean, if you do some of the certifications, you want some practical experience, it makes a lot of sense. And I guess, maybe to clarify as well, because I was just thinking, like not every company maybe will, I guess data governance is a little bit more common. Is it possible that someone else owns the privacy component? And I guess that was going to lead me into like the relationship with, the nature of the role. But if at my org, it doesn't stand out that someone has like that privacy title, would the data governance person potentially do this? Would it be a cybersecurity person, legal?
Yeah. I think that's another, at least I look at it, fun thing about the privacy profession is, like a very diverse set of areas that it could fit under. So in my career, I started out sitting in the editorial, organization overall. So editorial, this is what back at Yahoo basically is a policy making function for the company. But I also spent time in data engineering, where the privacy programs at for a while. Legal, of course. I built out a privacy team under the legal organization at Twitch. I was in marketing for a hot second, doing again very similar privacy work, just different org. So I think though in most companies where you will find privacy function would be under legal or under information security. And information security is where I sit now, building out the privacy team there as well. So I would recommend checking with those two places first. But if not, they might be somewhere else within the company in some other fun org.
And I guess to kind of dovetail into, you mentioned it sits within, potentially different areas within a company. We have a chief compliance officer, the CISO, CIO, CTO. We have a lot of chiefs. And I guess the question I was going to ask you, chief privacy officer, I've seen it. It's not as common as a whole lot of the other, leadership roles. Is that going to change? Is it a case of potentially, this role sits better under other programs, or how do you envision that, panning out?
Yeah, I think it is becoming more common, for sure. And I think, it will become more common at companies who are relying on a lot of personal data, because I think that's where you want to really have a strategic perspective. And like, how do you work with the personal data set? What are the choices you provide to data subjects? The technical infrastructure you want to build out for long-term growth. So those are very strategic decision with a lot of investment behind it. And I think that could be the driver for making sure someone who's senior and with a lot of experience in this area to take that role. I think at company that use or rely less on personal data, potentially, there won't be a CPO role there, but there still be a leader in terms of seniority, in terms of how far the person rise. Again, is really up to the company. But I do want to mention like an adjacent role that's also pretty interesting, and it's actually required by law, like for example by GDPR, which is the role of the data protection officer. And it is a role that the GDPR put out there. It is required for companies who is under GDPR scope. That person is supposed to help the company organize or think about how to comply with GDPR or similar data regulation. So I think there's also that path right there. It is not quite the chief privacy officer, because I think if you bucket it, the protection officer tends to lean a little bit more compliance centric, and chief privacy officer, at least from my perspective, lean a little bit more strategic and broader. So there are different paths to leadership in this field, and has slightly different flavor.
I mean, obviously, it seems like it's a lot of things are moving forward at a fast pace, a lot of change, a lot of dynamic environments, laws. It seems exciting, because I think if somebody likes that kind of progress, likes that kind of, maybe the functional side of it. You came from a CS degree, and obviously that has helped in a way, but it sounds like a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, someone can go learn these regulations, these laws, and actually learn how to build a practice around, which I think is awesome, because it seems like an invaluable skill that hasn't quite hit that tipping point. And like you said, people are willing to give you a shot because they need the help. So I think there's no better time than now to get started.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most, gratifying like experiences I have when talking about privacy or privacy engineering. And I do this in slightly different form, like, on awesome podcasts such as yours, at like conferences, but sometimes also at school. Go to school, really talk to, be a guest lecturer and talk to students about the profession. And one of the more satisfying experiences that I have is when students come up to me after class and say that, yeah, I think I can actually be a privacy engineer. I didn't think that was like a possibility for me. I used to think I need to have to code or something like that because there's like that term engineering in there. Oh, I heard about it before, but that person was a lawyer, so I didn't really think I can really enter that world. But now knowing how emerging it is, and just so many ways that one can participate, like folks are starting to realize it is a place for them, and I'm just like, oh yeah, of course, like that's fantastic. So
I think it's fantastic. I like it when people can get excited about a path, and especially emerging, because it means everyone can catch up quickly, even if you don't have a legal degree, which you kind of outlined some of the things. So I think it's been fantastic. Wayne, if somebody wants to reach out and ask you about how to do some of this stuff, I think we've given a lot of information out. How can somebody get a hold of you?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. It is my favorite social media network nowadays. So feel free to connect with me on there. I'm always happy to chat about privacy engineering. Like, and just be fully honest, like sometimes I'm slow to respond, but I will eventually do respond. So please do be patient with me on there. But I love connecting with folks and chat more about privacy engineering, etc.
Love it. We'll include your LinkedIn on the show notes, obviously, so people can reach out to you. Again, thank you for coming on. Thanks for covering the topic. I hadn't covered it before, and I think it'll be valuable to a lot of people to hear.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's been really fun. So
absolutely. That's it for the episode. Back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, this has been a great episode. I think we talked a lot about career opportunities, career path. I liked it because I feel like we can reach a lot of people. So share this with somebody else that might be interested in privacy engineering or wants to get into the field, or has a question that wants to follow up with Wang. Reach out to him. He seems very willing to help anyone. So take advantage of that opportunity. And if you want me to find another guest to talk about a similar topic, let me know. Like, that's what I'm here for. I'm trying to find what topics you want me to bring to you, and hopefully share those with you. Like, subscribe, leave a review wherever you're listening to this. I'd really appreciate that. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.